Hello and welcome. Hold on. I think I forgot to hit record. Oh no, it's recording. Hello and welcome to Take Back Time. My name is Penny Zanker and I'm your host. And on this show, we look to give you different aspects and approaches to productivity because it's not a one size fits all. And today we have an interesting and exciting approach to talk about with Tim Stringer. Tim Stringer, he is a veteran of the technology industry and a professionally trained coach and a recognized productivity expert and a seasoned yoga meditation teacher, right? There's a nice twist to that. And the founder of Technically Simple. Tim discovered David Allen's Getting Things Done methodology in 2008 while facing a stage 4 cancer situation, and the deep lessons from his healing journey combined with his new perspective on life and productivity have taken him down a very fulfilling and productive path. He currently provides productivity coaching and consulting and training to people and organizations all over the world. And in 2014, he launched a membership site called Learn OmniFocus that centers around OmniFocus Personal Task Manager for Mac, iOS, and the web. Tim, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks very much, Penny. It's great to be here.
Well, it's great to have you. You know, we were talking a little bit before, and I want to, make sure we're on the same page with the listeners and with each other. One of the questions that I ask everyone who's coming on the show is, what's their definition of productivity and why? So what's your answer to that question?
Yeah, sure. And I think that's a great place to start because it seems there's many different definitions of productivity as there are people. The one I like the best is that productivity is about producing something. It's a very creative process. So that could be sort of in the sort of typical work situation where someone's producing a report or organizing a meeting or something like that. But it could also be producing positive health and feelings of relaxation. And so it's really something that can apply to any area of life. I like David Allen quotes, I quote him quite a bit, and he says, if you go to a party and you don't boogie, it wasn't a very productive party. So I think it's really about what do you want to create in your life? And productivity is really the kind of the mechanism and the methodology for taking to that place.
Absolutely. I kind of, my definition is a little bit that productivity is really just a byproduct of thinking and acting more strategically. So as you said, focusing on the things that are most important. So thank you for that.
Answering the question, what do you want? And productivity is the journey of getting there.
Absolutely. What do you want, right? That's the big question. So, in your bio, it talks about how you got an extra different look on productivity from when you were, dealing with cancer, which is a really serious situation. Tell us about how productivity came to play when you're facing that type of challenge.
Yeah, sure. So this was back in 2008, and very unexpectedly, I was diagnosed with a stage 4 cancer, and I wasn't even sure if I was going to live to see Christmas that year.
Wow.
So I had definitely a radically different perspective on time, and I tend to be very positive and optimistic, I think, by nature, and part of me saw this as a challenge to say, okay, this is a tough situation. What can I learn from this? What are some new things that I develop? Even how can I make this? I didn't really necessarily frame it as productivity in the moment, but what are some tools I can use to help me get through this? And it was during that time that I read David Allen's Getting Things Done book. And at first, I didn't think it really applied to me. It didn't seem I was in a situation where these principles applied, but I was determined to kick the tires on it. And so I actually created a project around healing from cancer. And even just declaring that and taking actions towards that being a reality was very healing within itself. And I see that as one of the key things that supported me in getting through this, and not only surviving the cancer, but also taking all the lessons that come with a very, very sort of intense situation in life like that.
Absolutely. I just want to stop there for a second and have everybody step back who's listening to think about, whatever's going on in your life. It's probably not facing death, right? Which is what stage 4 cancer could look like. And to have that type of mindset, to shift your focus and to set, and declare a goal that you don't even know if it's possible, but really stepping into that really tells me, the power of focus and the power of declaration, right? And setting yourself forward to that. So I just want people to really absorb that, because so many people get overwhelmed and they think, oh, that's not possible. And, I can't do that. And we get caught up in sort of all the yeah, buts. And I think it's so great to hear how you took that. And I remember reading in a blog or something that you were in, that it said that you considered your cancer a circumstance.
Yeah. And I was working with a very talented coach at the time. And that was one of the things she coached me on, is to say, okay, how about looking at the cancer as a circumstance? Not to say it's not important or significant, all those things, but she said, just for this conversation, let's set it aside and say, what does your life look like without cancer? And so I had all these sort of creative thoughts that came forth, and this real sort of freedom opened up. And I said, I've always wanted to go to Hawaii. I was bragging in those days about racing Lance Armstrong in the Tour de France, because we had a very similar cancer to deal with.
Right.
And so I said, okay, I need to do something around cycling. And then I was also sharing that I got a lot from the experience, and I wanted to develop a workshop around it. So there was all of these things that felt very real to me in the moment, even though there was no way I was going to be cycling anywhere. I could barely walk some days. But I could at least take some action. I could at least register in a ride from Vancouver to Seattle that was taking place in the following year. And Amazing. Some people thought I was out of my tree, I think, what are you doing? But there was something very powerful about taking those steps that I could take in the moment, and really stepping into an inspired future without saying, well, I'll wait and see if I actually get through this thing or not. Yeah. There was a sort of an assumption that, of course I'm going to survive this thing, and I'll take a lot of lessons with me. And that's really one of the things that kept my spirits elevated and gave me the incentive, the motivation that I needed.
I love it. I mean, you took, by using the word circumstance and taking the actions that you did, it was kind of like an acceptance that this is where you are. And at the same time, you're not going to let it hold you back, right? It's that perfect word is it's a circumstance. It's not within your control. So you focused on the things that you could control. And I think that's important for everybody who's listening, is if you want to get yourself out of overwhelm, that's an important thing, is to accept where you are, see what's working and what's not working, and to take a look at what's next. What steps can you take? So I think that's very empowering for a lot of people who feel like they're who feel like they're stuck.
Acceptance is it's almost a forgotten practice. I think in a lot of cases it gets drowned out by the noise of life, but it's one of the most powerful practices there is. And in yoga, we call it santosha. It's acceptance of what is in the moment. And it's different from being complacent. It's not like, oh, this is the way things are, there's nothing I can do about it. It's more like things are the way they are. If I'm not in that place of acceptance, then I'm resisting life, and resisting takes a lot of energy. It's a very unproductive state, being in that mode of resistance.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's such an important point. I talk about that as well in terms of checking in on, the yeah buts. The bigger the yeah but, the bigger the resistance, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So did you get into meditation and yoga before your cancer or after?
I'd been practicing for quite a while and teaching it as well for quite a few years before getting into the cancer. And that was one of the unforeseen sort of circumstances where it was very helpful to have that skill. Because I think the mind is, especially when we're faced with something major like this, the mind can take us down a very unproductive paths where it's very easy to fall into that victim. And not to sugarcoat it and say I didn't have moments of being a victim. I wouldn't be human.
You're human, right?
Yeah, exactly. But if I could even at least see my thoughts and notice that stream of thoughts and notice that there's a lot of noise, that there's a lot of thoughts that are not very useful. There's a lot of
Right.
sort of subconscious patterning that's playing out. And so just having that strength of mind to be able to recognize that and rise above it at least some of the time, that's definitely had a huge impact. And you hear all these stories about people who were sent off to prison for 30 years or something, and how did they survive? And I think a lot of it comes down to their mental strength and their ability, even if their body is in a rough state. We always have our minds. We can, if we have a discipline, we can rise above the circumstances and see the lessons and not get too caught up in it all. And meditation is essentially the training that makes that possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So everyone who's listening, no matter what state you're in, you could add a short meditation in your practice to help you be more focused, to help you be more resilient in everything that you do.
Yeah, just like we take care of our bodies, we need to take care of our minds as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's extremely important. Yeah.
So, Tim, you came up with a holistic approach to productivity. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I wanted to encapsulate the lessons I got from going through that journey through cancer, partially so hopefully people can benefit from the wisdom and not have to face something so major themselves, and have something that can be taught and practiced. I've refined it down to 4 pillars, and the first one is I call inner reflection. So it's the importance of hitting the pause button regularly and looking at life. Where am I going? Where am I at? It's one of those things that it's very easy, I think, to get into this sort of false sense of productivity where we maybe think we're going somewhere, but we're really just getting more efficient at going around in circles, and there's no clear definition there. So it's about just sitting down and planning and saying, okay, where am I in this moment? Journaling is a very powerful process in there. Even just finishing a big project and taking some time to reflect on what worked and what didn't work, and what did I actually learn, even if the project didn't go very well at all.
Especially if they didn't go very well.
And if it does go very well, I think it's very valuable as well to say, okay, what allowed this to work so well? Absolutely. So in the moment, it might seem like, oh, I've got a bunch of other things to do. I don't have time to do this. And I think it's more accurate to say you don't have time not to do this, because this is ultimately what's going to allow you to make the best use of your time.
Absolutely.
So that's the first pillar. The second we've already talked about is santosha, or acceptance, and that importance of accepting life as it is. And there's a lot of stuff pulling us away from acceptance, like consumerism is based on you need more stuff to be happy. There's something wrong about you that needs to be fixed. And not to say there aren't very useful products and services out there, but there is that kind of negative side, which is selling you something you don't really need, or selling you something that's sort of fulfilling this self-doubt.
Right.
So that's the second one. So the first 2 ones are really being more in a yin, a passive state. And then the second 2, next one is focus. And there's maybe a tendency to try to do too many things all at the same time. I certainly continue to find myself falling into that trap sometimes.
Right.
And just not even necessarily switching tasks, but having too many projects on my plate at one time.
Right.
So focus is about choosing some specific areas, some specific shifts to make. And the holistic side of holistic productivity is really that if you create a positive change in one area of life, it's going to impact all others. And the area that seems to need the attention might not necessarily be the one to put your attention on. So especially when I do this work in corporations, I'll go in and give a course that centers around this. And I find a lot of the times people might be struggling at work, but at the end of the day, they choose to focus on getting more sleep or getting more exercise, because if they don't give those things some attention, they might just continue to walk into work tired and stressed every day, and their capacity for productivity is inherently limited through those things. So it's giving ourselves the freedom to look at all areas of life and say, yeah, this area is one that I think if I gave it some good solid attention over the next few months, it's really going to impact all of my life. I don't have to be working in all these different areas all at once.
Right. It's going to impact everything else. It's going to boost everything else.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So that's kind of being strategic about where am I putting my energy and
Yeah.
attention. And then the fourth one is inspired action. So this is countering, like, there's a tendency to say, okay, when I get this new job or when I finish this project, and I'm going to be happy, and that happiness never tends to show up. It's always something we're chasing after. So inspired action is really getting in touch with what is it you're creating in your life. And in the courses I lead, we sometimes do an exercise where people even imagining themselves going a few months into the future, having achieved something, whether it's getting their inbox under control or sorting out their basement or having a relationship that's working at a new level, and just really inhabiting that space in a very creative way, and noticing how they feel in that moment, and realizing that they can actually feel that same sense of satisfaction in the present,
Mm.
without those things necessarily having to be in place, and just having that experience in the present ultimately become something that inspires forward movement, because they've had a taste of what's possible in life, and they're already getting the benefits just by being willing to go down that path.
Fantastic. Fantastic. They're four uh, so important areas to help you to get, more productive and boost your ability. Actually, it's not even, it's not even what you're getting things done. I mean, if you look at all of that, it's creating more meaning in your life. It's being happier, finding more joy. Like, I can see it really being all of those things, right? At the end, then you feel more productive when you feel happier, right? I mean, I think the studies have even shown that when people, the happiness studies are showing that when people are happier at work or at home, that they're actually demonstrating greater performance and productivity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the greatest sources of happiness, I've heard the Dalai Lama talk about this, is to be in service to others.
Yes.
And unless we have some clarity on our gifts, on direction and so forth, it's difficult to even navigate those waters of being in service. What does that look like? How can we develop the capacity to truly serve others and ultimately be happy? So there's a lot getting done as part of the process, but I don't think getting things done is really the point.
Right.
Even David Allen, I've heard him talk about getting things done. That's not really the reason he wrote the book, so people could get more done. He wanted them to have more space in their life to
Right.
be creative, to have an amazing experience in life. So
Absolutely.
it's kind of,
Sometimes we have to
there's,
put
yeah,
the message out there of what people think they want, right? So you give them what they think they want, and you give them what they need as well, right?
yeah, absolutely. I think that's I don't know for sure, but I imagine that's the reason he named the book "Getting Things Done,"
Mm.
because that's the thing that was going to get people's attention. That once they dive in, they realize, oh, there's something much deeper here. There's a whole other world that can emerge from that.
Absolutely. When you said the Dalai Lama talking about being in service to others, it reminded me of a study that I remember that was done at University of Pennsylvania, and they wanted to study and understand better, all these people who were frustrated and felt like they didn't have enough time, and levels of stress were super high, and they wanted to see whether time really was a factor in that. Have you seen or heard about that study?
I don't think I've come across that particular one, but I've seen similar ones for sure.
So they split these two groups, and one group, they were given um, given back their time. So basically, they took responsibilities away from them so that they had a couple of hours more a week to do whatever it is that they wanted to do, to give them that space. So they had more time. That everybody's saying, "I wish I had more time." And then the second group, they gave them community service. So in addition to everything that they already had to do, they now had to also dedicate a few hours a week to community service. So they had less time, right, and more to do. And they of course, we have to do all these brain studies. They measured the cortisol and asked them a number of different questions. So they were looking at the hormones in their system and what they were feeling, and they measured it before they started, and then after, and throughout the process. And what they found out was that the people who were given community service, their stress levels and their feeling about how much time they had actually went down, right? They were happier and felt more satisfied with the time that they had. And the people who were given their time back were equally as stressed, so as they were before. There was no change, or it went a little bit higher, where they actually had more free time, but they didn't utilize it, or they didn't register it in how they felt. So I think that also speaks to the fact, like you said, that when we get outside of ourselves and we're focusing on others and giving back, it regulates how we feel in general, and that then ripples to how we feel about our time and our relationship with time.
Yeah, absolutely. And that definitely sounds like a fascinating study. And yeah, I think relationship to time is a key factor. We can be in this mode of scarcity, or we can be in a mode of abundance about, I think, any area of our life, whether it's time or money or anything we might have not enough of or plenty of. And I think the reality is we are given a very generous amount of time in our lifetimes. But a lot of the time we're disconnected from the world, and we're not really present for a lot of life. There's so much to distract us, especially in this day and age, and so much to pull us away. And then we've got maybe some subconscious programming saying there's not enough time, there's not enough of this. And so having something that shifts that, and again, coming back to practices like meditation or being in service too, I think is a way of strengthening our meditative mind in itself. I was actually just teaching a class on this yesterday, so this is very fresh in my mind about our meditative neutral mind, and that's one of the key ways in which we rise above kind of the duality of life, and is to meditate and develop that relationship to our thoughts.
Absolutely. You mentioned technology and distractions. And I know you do a lot of consulting too, right? On helping companies to utilize technology, right? Or you have in the past.
Yeah, no, that's really what I do, is bridge the sort of the productivity methodologies and the technology. So technology actually becomes something that serves us, not something that becomes a sort of source of stress or time drain or those sorts of things.
Well, it can be, right? And so, there's so many apps out there, and people moving and shifting from one process and one platform and one tool, and they use it for a little while and then they say it doesn't work, and then they go to the next. We do expend and believe that technology is going to be a huge support. And in some cases, instead of boosting our productivity, it's actually draining our productivity. How do you approach that with your clients?
I think the key word is approach. So there needs to be an approach to using technology. As I like to joke, owning a calculator doesn't make you a mathematician. It doesn't matter how good the tools are, how capable they are. We still need those kind of basic life skills. Things like holistic productivity and getting things done. And I'm looking forward to the day those actually are taught in schools, because I think they're as foundational as things like reading and arithmetic. And then once we have sort of a strategy for using the technology, then it's much easier to use it effectively. And when I'm working with people for the first time, we don't delve right into the technology, even though they're really tempted to say, oh, I want to know how to use this app. We'll actually look at, okay, what are you responsible for in your life? What's important to you? And where are things falling through the cracks? And okay, now we've kind of got the landscape of life and responsibilities. How can we actually use a technology to take some pressure off you, to make sure that these things get the appropriate amount of attention? So it's coming more from a place of purpose versus I just spent all this money on this new computer or device, and I want to make sure I don't miss out on any cool apps that are out there, which is
right, which a lot of people get caught up in. I was actually thinking, does technology make us lazy? Because we think the technology is going to fix it for us, and maybe we spend less time planning and less time on our approach than we would if we didn't have the technology.
I think the technology itself is really neutral. It's really comes down to how we use the tools. What relationship do we have with the technology? Because technology can help us be very, like, there's an app I use on Mac and iOS called Mind Map, and that one is an incredibly useful tool for me to think through sort of complex ideas and get thoughts out of my head and bring form to it. There's also apps like, I'm a big fan of Day One, which is a journaling app, and that's a very powerful tool for reflection. There's apps that can help people with mindfulness and meditation and so forth. So it's can be potentially very distracting and time wasting, but it can also be something that really connects us with ourself and our purpose and all of those things. And that's really big part of my mission, is to help people use the technology in a way that really enhances their life and improves their communication, both internally and externally, and ultimately creates a better planet.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that there's a point where there's just too many apps? You know, like where, because I mean, if I look on my phone sometimes, I had to go through an app cleanse, right? And I had to get rid of half the apps that I wasn't using, and they're taking up space on my phone, but I feel like they're also taking up space in my brain, right? So is
Sure,
there
yeah.
is there like an optimal number of apps or processes that you could say this is good enough?
I think the key is having things be as complicated as you need them to be, but no more complicated than that. So I see both extremes where people try to use too few apps, and those apps get overloaded and they're being used for things they're maybe not
But they're not
designed for,
supposed to be, right?
and they end up overwhelmed. And then there's people who have like 30 note-taking apps, and they can't decide which one to use when they need to take notes at a meeting like that. So that creates stress at the other extreme. So it's about getting clear about, okay, if I have a thought about something, great idea, do I have a place to put that? And if the answer is, yeah, I have 12 places to put it, then that's the cue to simplify things.
Yeah.
If the answer is, I have nowhere to put that, or I haven't decided, then that's an opportunity to look at the system and say, okay, is something on my device already going to do the job? Do I need to go looking for another app? And then if the answer is I need to find an app, one thing I always enjoy doing is finding like the top apps that are out there, the ones that really fulfill the kind of the cream that rises to the top.
Uh-huh.
And so there might be 3,000 apps for taking notes, but maybe there's 3 that are seriously worth considering.
Right.
And it's not even worth looking at the other ones because they don't. We have a rich, like if those other 3 didn't exist, maybe we could look at the ones that are less capable or less designed. But we have such a wealth of apps and information and things, and I really believe in drawing from the best of the best, because why not?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then that choice overwhelms us. So when we can narrow it down to the top 3, it makes it much easier to quickly make a selection, right? As opposed to getting overwhelmed with too much choice.
And that can be talking to other people as well. Maybe somebody who's got an app they really enjoy, and not just what app is it, but how are you actually using it? How are you organizing it? Because a lot of these apps are kind of blank canvases in a sense, and they can be used in so many different ways. So having some guidance around how other people use it. And I have a site, as you mentioned earlier, dedicated to a personal task manager called OmniFocus. And one of the things I do is I bring in people. We have interviews of people who have been using OmniFocus for a long time. They actually walk through, this is how I'm actually using it in my day-to-day life. These are the ways that I have it organized. These are the other apps that I use alongside it. And not to say that someone's going to adopt that verbatim, but at least it gives them a good starting point. And they say, okay, that's pretty close to what I need, but I'm going to make a few little tweaks here and phrase things in a way that makes sense to me, and those sorts of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we all have different personality types, approaches, ways that we do things, and what works for someone else might work for us, and it might not. So we have to, I think, getting and understanding how people use it really does make sense. So you can see, is that how I would use it? Or do I need something, that's more this or more that? So that goes with the way that they work.
Yeah. And starting off simply and then adding the complexity as needed, I'd say, is a good rule of thumb. Absolutely. And if you do decide to switch from one, let's say, note-taking app to another, I do it completely. Don't leave some stuff in the old one and keep some stuff in the new one. Just say, okay, I'm gonna move. It almost be like moving apartments or something like that, and still, leaving a couch back in your old place and some books and.
Be all in and commit to it.
Be all in, yeah, exactly.
The wishy-washy doesn't work in any area of our life, does it?
No, I think it just creates unnecessary stress.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Tim, thank you so much. So lastly, what's the best productivity advice that you got?
Well, there's since we were talking a bit about yoga, there's some great advice from the yoga master Yogi Bhajan, and he says, "When the time is on you, start, and the pressure will be off." And I just love that piece of advice because I find this for myself. If I'm really dwelling on something, I'm probably not doing anything about it.
Mm,
And even just taking one small action, taking even 2 minutes to write down some ideas or have a chat with someone, it's just amazing how freeing that is, how it really does take the pressure off. So something very practical that I try to practice every day, and I've gotten a lot of benefit from.
fantastic. Thank you. Well, Tim, thank you so much for being here. Where is the best place for people to get a hold of you going forward?
You can Technically Simple is my company, so it's technicallysimple.com. And I'm also on Twitter at Tim Stringer, at TIMSTRINGER. And if you're interested in my kind of yogic personal side of life, there's a website, timstringer.com, where I've written some articles, including some about my journey through cancer.
Fantastic. Well, Tim, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and I loved hearing about the 4 aspects of your holistic productivity approach. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome, Penny. Thanks again. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Me too. And I hope you all enjoyed the conversation, and not just enjoyed it, but took away some practical tips and some things that you can do from this day forward in the way that you approach, whether it's your technology, whether your mindset, and that you just, maybe it's just any of those 4 areas that Tim talked about in his holistic approach. Any of those can be an opener to greater productivity for you in every area of your life. So thanks for being here. My name's Penny Zanker, and this is Take Back Time. We'll see you in the next episode.